There at the top of the hour. It does feel like deja vu because this is really the fourth time we're in this situation over the course of the last 5 or 6 months or so. And depending on whether or not an indictment does happen against former President Donald Trump there now in yet another jurisdiction, we will be here covering it live from every angle, live, raw, and unfiltered, like we always do. We're going to work on getting one of our next guests up and ready for you, legal analyst Andrew Lieb, so we can really dive into the case. I just want to show you this tweet, though, from one of our Fox 5 Atlanta folks. Take a look at this from Randy Travis. He says, former Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan has finished his grand jury testimony, perhaps one more witness to go. So that's what we're hearing from our folks there, friends at Fox 5 in Atlanta. We also have a LiveNOW look inside the courthouse as well. And you can see there that entrance there. That's a live picture. Also outside the courthouse as well in Fulton County, Georgia. So we're going to get into this case in just a matter of moments here. All right, and like I said, Andrew Craft here just a little bit after the top of the 4 o'clock hour here on the West Coast, a little bit after 7 o'clock there in Fulton County, Georgia. And really a story we've been kind of anticipating all throughout the spring and summer months is the grand jury called by a district attorney, Fani Willis, there in Fulton County, Georgia. This probe has been going on for well over 2 years into possible 2020 election interference stemming from that presidential election, and everyone is thinking or somewhat anticipating yet another indictment against former President Donald Trump. If that happens, it would be his fourth indictment, 2 in state court, 2 in federal court, just in the last 5 or 6 months or so. So let's get into this story a little deeper with legal analyst in front of the program, Andrew Lieb. He joins me now. Andrew, good to see you. I did want to kind of do broad strokes before we get into some of the particulars of the case here. This grand jury, we just spoke with Caroline Elliott. They're still meeting right now in the courthouse. We have producers in the courthouse. Witnesses are coming and going. We just learned that former Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Jeff Duncan, just left his testimony. It was supposed to take place tomorrow. It was kind of sped up and took place today. From what you have seen and what you've been reading, this is moving at quite a rapid pace, is it not?
It's moving very fast. Originally, we thought it was going to be 2 days. It might be tonight. Most interestingly, though, you just said Jeff Duncan testified, and Trump had put out a Truth Social, I think it might have even been witness tampering, saying he shouldn't testify. So Jeff Duncan didn't listen to Trump. We'll see if Fani Willis adds something about that, because Trump was telling him not to testify. Then he did testify. So we'll see where that goes. But we could have something as early as tonight, maybe tomorrow. It seems like something's going on, but I always caution everyone, don't prejudge what an indictment says until you read the indictment. I'm fighting with people, Andrew, all over online, and they're saying, this is bogus, this is good, this is right, this is terrible. And all I'm saying is we haven't even seen the grand jury's vote yet. In Georgia, fortunately, it's immediately unsealed when it's taken up, so we'll be able to read and understand what happens. Let's wait till that moment, Andrew, and then we can really get into it.
All right, before we get into what that indictment might look like, help us make sense of, just the particulars of special grand jury proceedings. From, our discussions in the past, does the vote have to be unanimous on bringing an indictment for whatever target or defendant they intend to charge?
So to differentiate, to remind you, we had that special grand jury in Georgia, where they convened them just to do an evidentiary experience. They had to go through and they had to go review all the documents, and they put out this whole report, and Trump actually tried to get it tossed out, and he wasn't able to get it tossed out. He tried to get Fani Willis. She actually made a joke that Trump wouldn't even be able to pronounce her name. I don't know how to pronounce her name. Fani Willis to off the case, and he lost on that. This is actually the grand jury now, and yeah, there has to be a certain amount of votes. We like to see those 12 votes the way I understand it. Each state is different. I'm not a Georgia attorney, but yeah, they're going to see the evidence. The big difference, Andrew, between a grand jury and actual jury in a trial. When we're in a trial, they have to find beyond a reasonable doubt. When we're in a grand jury, they just have to find what's called reasonable suspicion, which is called probable cause, Andrew.
Okay, and that kind of is a good segue, Andrew, into kind of what happened today, because this is quite unusual. And you saw some reporters from the outlet Reuters having to kind of backtrack over this. I have this in my hand. It's a 2-page document, and it really did fool a lot of people today. This was posted on the website of Fulton County Superior Court, I believe, kind of outlining an indictment. People thought it was an indictment, but it was not. And now you're getting both Fulton County, the DA's office responding, the Trump attorneys, his legal team responding to this. I just want to read what the official statement from the court is on those earlier false reports about this indictment. They had a podium and a camera set up, but I think they just made this statement in lieu of that. They say, the Office of the Fulton County Clerk or Superior Magistrate Courts has learned of a fictitious document that has been circulated online and reported by various media outlets to the Fulton County Special Purpose Grand Jury. While there have been no documents filed today regarding such, all members of the media should be reminded that documents that do not bear an official case number, filing date, and the number of the clerk of courts in concert are not considered official filings and should not be treated as such. But, Andrew, this 2-page document was posted on the website, then taken down very, very quickly, so much so that reporters took it as serious, took it as an indictment, so much so that the document in question listed the various charges that could have been filed against former President Trump. What is going on here? This is a huge mistake, is it not?
It sure seems that way, Andrew. It's actually, I'm reading it too. It says publicrecordsaccess.fultoncountyga.gov. That's the site, .gov. That's what we're looking at there. And to be clear, this does have a case number on it. It doesn't have any signatures on it or anything like that. If you look at the top, though, the case number is right up there. And what's interesting is we're seeing 39 charges on there. And I did some rough math, and assuming these are the charges, it looks like, Andrew, Donald Trump could be facing 218 years in jail on these 39 charges. Georgia's an interesting place because they have this thing called conspiracy. We've heard that in a lot of places. And solicitation. Those are both on this charging document in multiple occasions. But why is it interesting? In Georgia, if you get conspiracy or solicitation, you're chargeable up to half what the actual crime would be. So, for example, solicitation of violation of oath by a public officer, that's up to 5 years. But if it's a solicitation, it's 2.5 years. So when you add it all up, it seems like 218 years he could be facing. This is a big leak. We don't know if it's true or it's false. And more importantly, I think this is the crucial point that I think you and I want to deliver to everyone out there. We don't know any facts supporting any of these charges. So let's assume, for argument's sake, it is true. We don't know how they got there. We don't know what the co-conspirators are. We don't know what the elements charged were. It's very vague. It just gives statute numbers and names and whether it's a serious felony or a felony and the date. It doesn't say much. So with those tea leaves, it would be like having 5 pieces of a 400-piece puzzle, Andrew.
Yeah. I mean, also, just for the sake of argument, Andrew, for our viewers, too, this 2-page document that was released that outlined, charges against former President Trump and what would be an indictment. How could an indictment like this, I'm calling it an indictment for the sake of argument here, how could it have even been prepared before the grand jury has concluded its proceedings? What comes first here?
It would be functionally impossible the way they're proceeding. The way they're proceeding is that they are going to have the grand jury vote, and when the grand jury votes and they return the charges, then we go forward. What it could be, though, is it could be an outline of the charges that the prosecutor, Fonnie Willis's office, is seeking in the first place.
Okay.
It could be a list. It could be a roadmap. So it does give us some tea leaves and an idea, but the steps go that the evidence is presented to the grand jury. The prosecutor, Fonnie Willis's office, they request that the grand jury votes on certain charges. If the grand jury finds probable cause, then the indictment can be returned from there. So since the grand jury is still hearing witnesses, it's functionally impossible that this is the actual indictment at this point. And I would caution everyone that until a grand jury votes, we don't know that there's reasonable suspicion. We don't know that there's probable cause. That's just the definition of probable cause. We don't know that a grand jury who heard the evidence knows it. And everyone's prejudging and saying, this is good, this is bad, they know this, they know that. Unless you're sitting in that grand jury room right now, you have no idea. I have no idea. We haven't heard the evidence. You have to hear the evidence before you can make any judgment calls on whether a prosecution is good or bad, Andrew.
Okay, and Andrew, for our viewers as well, we have a camera inside the courthouse outside of the grand jury proceeding. It looks like a lot of reporters and producers have gathered there for something. We also have a live picture outside with barricades set up. The security preparations have been in place for some time in the high anticipation of whatever is coming down here. I want to just read the statement, though, Andrew, from Trump's legal team on this false indictment that was posted very briefly on the court's website. They say the Fulton County District Attorney's Office has once again shown that they have no respect for the integrity of the grand jury process. This was not a simple administrative mistake. A proposed indictment should only be in the hands of the district attorney's office, yet it somehow made its way to the clerk's office, as it was assigned a case number, and a judge before the grand jury even deliberated. This is emblematic of the pervasive and glaring constitutional violations which have plagued this case from its very inception. Andrew, do Trump's legal team and his attorneys, do they have a point? How much of a glaring mistake was this? And going forward, will it matter in how Fonnie Willis has to prosecute this potentially against former President Trump? Is it going to be a factor in this at all, you think, or is it just a blip?
The way you asked that is a two-part question, so important because they both have such different answers. It's exactly what a defense counsel should be stating. I would give accolades to Trump's defense counsel. They should be pouncing on this. They should win the public opinion, the fight of public opinion, the potential jury pool. It's a definite statement, and that's why we always tell our clients that you need to have crisis management, not just legal. You need to work PR, not just work legal, because you have to win the hearts and minds of potential jurors at all times to the extent you can. And this was the right decision. That all being said, it's going to make absolutely no difference. It is no benefit to the prosecutor to have this out there. It does not help their case. It makes Fonnie Willis look bad. She would not want this to be out there. I can't see how they would have any intention to leak this. I doubt it was a leak. Why would you leak it? It would hurt their case, if anything. But in the ultimate state, it's just going to be another blip, to answer your question. Exactly as you put it. It's going to be one of those PR media battles that we see all over conservative media and then all over liberal media, and everyone taking different spins, but it's a whole lot of nothing. You know what the something is? The something is when the grand jury votes and we get the real indictment. This is just gamesmanship. This is just talking points. This is to rile bases on both sides. But serious people know the serious event is when the indictment is returned, it's unsealed, we can evaluate it, for an arraignment and trial, whether Trump is actually indicted or others, Andrew.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, serious people, though, Andrew, did kind of fall for it. Serious reporters, especially there at Reuters. And how could you not? It looked official, and it was taken down very, very quickly here. I want to talk about what the potential charges could be if the former president is indicted. Andrew, throughout the last, 2.5, almost 3 years, we've all been talking about, especially when it comes to the 2020 election and the aftermath of that, this phone call. The Washington Post broke it, I believe, January 3rd, 2021, that took place between Donald Trump, then president, his team of attorneys, and members of the Secretary of State in Georgia's office, including the Secretary of State himself, Brad Raffensperger. And Trump was heard on this phone call that was leaked to the Washington Post, asking Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, to find thousands of votes 11,780 to be exact. That would put him over the edge to win the state of Georgia. Now, all throughout this story, you've been hearing whether or not Fani Willis is going to make that a hallmark of her case and possibly, incorporate RICO statutes in relation to this phone call here. Do you think that's going to be a hallmark of this indictment when, we get it potentially tonight, potentially tomorrow? That phone call is talked about all the time. Did Willis use it to bring this indictment, you think?
I think it's definitely a big part of this. I think we're also hearing, I don't know what you're hearing, but there's big reporting going on about the voting system breach over in Coffee County and how Fani Willis has text messages and emails tying Trump's legal team directly to that breach. I think that if you look at this, whatever it is, floated indictment, and just to be clear, I think that everyone's serious to be reporting on this two-page indictment, and it's worth us discussing. But I think if you think that it ultimately resolves the case, that's when it becomes non-serious. Nothing becomes serious until the evidence is handed over from the prosecutor to the defense counsel. But back to your specific question, and I'm just going to get as basic as I can. If you have some time tonight, go find that recording. Go listen to the recording. It took me, I think, 15 or 20 minutes to listen to it. I recommend you listen to it. It really, forgetting the law of everything, shows you what Trump and his team was doing to Brad. And Brad's a Republican, this guy that was defending it on the tape. Brad Raffensperger, he's defending it, and Trump berates him over and over again to get those votes, as you were just saying, the 780 votes. And he says, we could win by one, we could win by two. But I'm going to tell you, we had a meeting in my office about it today. And what we talked about right now is why in our legal documents, we always bullet facts. And we put in specific, you've probably heard of the 5 W's of who, what, when, where, and you know what? Witnesses. And we put in those things all the time. And the reason why we do these things is to show specifics and to show proof. And Brad kept saying back, here's how we did an audit. Here's how we had the FBI involved. Here's how we checked everything. And all your claims don't hold water. Show me evidence. And then Trump conclusively would bully him and say, you need to give the answer. And I think it's a very telling piece of evidence there about how there's no specifics given from Trump or his team in that call over and over again. It's just berating him to change and find these votes and then asserting that he's right and that the state of Georgia is wrong. I don't know that that's criminal. I don't know that that alone would get racketeering without more going on, but it certainly was not a perfect call from my point of view because it had so little facts and so little substance and so much bullying, which I don't think is how you could get any elected official, particularly a Republican, particularly one who worked with FBI, to change their vote. So I plead with everyone to listen to this recording and make your own decision, Andrew.
Yeah, you were just looking in the inside of the courthouse there, and a lot of, I think, reporters and producers had gathered, and now they have left that shot. So I'm not entirely sure what that indicates. We still have this picture inside. We still have this picture outside. Andrew, when you're talking about visual access, this is so interesting because this is not a federal court. This is a state court, and from what we're reporting today, the media will be allowed for a possible arraignment, for a possible trial throughout the duration. One of our reporters essentially was saying he doesn't remember a time there in Fulton County when any proceeding in court was not filmed. There was no video component. I think that's going to be so interesting. We have not been privy to that throughout the last 3 indictments. Yes, we've gotten courtroom sketches. Yes, we've gotten entrances and exits, but we have not gotten on camera the full proceedings. That would be quite something. Very, very important for the historical record, but just to watch all the players and their body language and their facial movements and everything like that, it would add a whole new dimension to it.
I was listening to some arguments, actually. Federal courts, as you were just comparing to, don't allow cameras into the jury.
Yeah.
And into the courtroom. They don't allow you to bring cameras in or recording devices whatsoever in federal courts. And I was listening to some arguments about why the DC federal indictment should be also with cameras in the courtroom, because they were saying that, if you're a victim, you're allowed in the courtroom. And there was some example of another case where victims couldn't go to the court, so they allowed closed circuit cameras in the federal case. And they said, since the charges against Trump are saying that he victimized American voters, then American voters should be able to have closed circuit cameras into the courtroom and to watch it. And there were some arguments about whether Jack Smith would agree with the defense counsel to allow them in. And I don't know if that's going to happen, but I want to echo your sentiment that not only is it an awesome experience that we'll be able to get into the courtroom and watch faces and watch pauses and watch the judge and watch the jury and see how the system unravels, but the legitimacy that it's going to create in Georgia, and it's a shame New York doesn't allow it. New York's very much like the federal system. The legitimacy this is going to provide is unmeasurable. I would hope that we should pass a law, maybe Congress passes a law, maybe each state passes a law, that when an elected official is the defendant, they should allow, if the crimes are relevant to their elected capacity, they should allow cameras into the courtroom. Because right now we have so many people with conjecture and going into their tribe saying they're right, they're wrong, and the evidence should speak for itself. I remember when I was a kid and the entire country got enamored with the O.J. Simpson trial, and it really had very little to do with our life, but we learned so much about the judicial system and about the glove, and if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. And we need to see things like that as the American people, particularly with a former president, a Republican runner being indicted. I'm so glad Georgia's indicating they're going to do that, and I wish the other 3 jurisdictions would do that as well, Andrew.
Okay, I want to talk, though, about some of these witnesses to the grand jury here. I want to put up this tweet, Andrew. This is from some of our photographers there from Fox 5 Atlanta, Billy Heath, with that photo saying, just now, that's former Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Jeff Duncan, who they caught on camera saying this, quote, "I think it's important to tell the truth and to respond to the constitutional duty of answering the questions of the grand jury." And so you mentioned at the very, very start of this conversation, former President Trump took to Truth Social, encouraging Jeff Duncan not to comply, not to testify with this grand jury. Obviously, he went ahead and did that anyway. That was interesting. We'll see if that comes up as well in this case. Trump outright saying that a witness should not even appear before a grand jury investigating him and his actions surrounding the 2020 election. But you also had Donald Trump just 2 days ago, August the 12th, say about that phone call, and we've heard it time and time again, he said it was a perfect call. So it seems like the former president is really going on the offensive here, trying to preempt some of this once this indictment comes down, and there's so many facets to this. No doubt we're going to be hearing from him a lot, but over the course of the last 2 weeks, Andrew, especially in the wake of the federal indictment and arraignment there in Washington over the other 2020 election case brought by Jack Smith, the special counsel, the judge in D.C. has really gone to great lengths to try to, minimize and compartmentalize what former President Trump can and cannot say in various venues, on social media, what have you, or there will be repercussions. Is that what we're going to face here, you think?
Absolutely. I think that Trump's asking for the judge to give him a tongue lashing. I just need to tell everyone that if you are ever the subject of a subpoena like Jeff Duncan was, you can't just not appear. That's not optional. You can end up in contempt of court. Now, you can do an application for what's called a protective order to quash the subpoena. That's okay. You can go to the judge and you could say, Judge, I want to be excused. That's really what you're doing. But you can't just not appear. It's not an option, and you're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble. So this what Trump's doing is not okay. And I think what he's saying about the call being a perfect call, that's totally fine. That's fair game. What they did in New York, you're talking about the protective order, which we can just think about as a confidentiality agreement that the court orders. What the judge said, and I thought it was so interesting. You're talking about Judge Chutkan over in D.C. What Judge Chutkan did, which I think is it was great. She basically said, I'm paraphrasing, I don't have the quote in front of me, but don't play games. If it's close to it, we know you're doing it. We know that you use kind of sort of words to try and allude to things. That's not okay too. And I think that was so important for her to say that, yeah, on a lot of ways, the Trump team won the battle on a lot of ways, they won the battle with Jack Smith as to the scope of the protective order. But tie goes to Jack Smith. That's what we got. If Trump gets this narrower protective order, he violates it. He talks to witnesses about the evidence, and he violates that. He's going to have a lot of trouble. And I'm looking to the day and not forward to it. I'm looking to it, though, because Trump keeps testing it. He's like my 4-year-old. Can you put your hand on the burner? Can you put your hand on the burner? The guy is going to get burned. One of these judges is going to have enough, and he's going to face a serious hearing about violation. And to remind you, Georgia, he hasn't been arraigned yet. But in these other 3 jurisdictions, New York, Florida, and D.C., he's out technically on bail. They can revoke the bail. They can hold him in custody pending the trial. And what Tanya Chutkan said, the judge, is, you know what's going to happen is if you violate my protective order, that just shows me more reasons to have a speedier trial, to move faster so there can't be intimidation of witnesses. Really comes down to this, Andrew. Do we as a society want all of our criminal trials to be by public vote? Just automatically, everyone could just vote and we could just decide who do we like, what do we want? Or do we want it tried with competent evidence, with a judge administering it, with a jury of our peers under the Constitution in a courtroom? And that's what these judges are going to maintain, Andrew.
Okay, I just want to go back, though, to this 2-page document, this false indictment that was posted very, very briefly today on the website publicrecordsaccess.fultoncountyga.gov. Fulton County is saying it's a fictitious document that was circulating on social media, yet it was posted on their website, which is presumably why it had some reporters fooled. I know we talked a lot about this, but doesn't, the DA's office need to get their story straight here about what exactly went wrong with this before we can kind of move forward here? I know the grand jury is still, meeting. It's being convened right now. Judge McBurney is there. Witnesses are testifying. But don't they need to clear that up? Why would they call it a fictitious document?
It beats me. Okay. Let's start off, though, with the fact that I got it from a secondary source. I don't know about you. I didn't pull it directly from the Georgia website. So I don't even know if it was there or not, or if I got it from someone else that was circulating around. So I can't really comment to that. But what I would say to you is that we have to separate these 2 issues. One is a grand jury proceeding going on with witnesses testifying about evidence being presented by the Georgia the DA, Fani Willis, she's presenting Fulton County. She's presenting evidence, and will they do a probable cause and issue an indictment? That's one issue. The second issue is PR, just from getting credibility, legitimacy from the clerk's office, from the court system, from the DAs. That needs to be straightened out for sure. 100%. I don't think they've done a good job about that. But I don't think that in a substantive matter, that takes anything away from what a grand jury ultimately decides. I think it's a shame it came out. It could have been one rogue warrior that posted something in the clerk's office that shouldn't be doing it. They need to heighten their security. They got to figure out who did this. If it was on the government website, maybe we get some charges from that too, about whoever put it up, because it's a wrong thing to do, but it doesn't undermine the evidence the grand jury's hearing. And let's find out who's charged, if Trump, if these 12 other people we hear might be happening, and what they're charged with, Andrew.
Yeah, and speaking about, it could not only be former President Trump, it could be others in his orbit, other allies who really mounted this effort in the aftermath of the 2020 election, to bring these lawsuits, to allege massive fraud, what have you. So there could be, multiple defendants in the indictment, which I think is interesting. We'll have to wait and see, though. We wanted to devote the first half hour of this hour to really dive into this. They're still meeting, Andrew. We could potentially get something tonight in this, and that would mean yet another indictment, a 4th indictment against former President Trump, if he so happens to be one of the defendants Fani Willis is going after, charging him with, we don't know what yet, over 2020 election malfeasance, pressure on officials in the Peach State there, over the results in a state that Republicans lost in 2020. So help us kind of, before we go, just unpack the historic nature of this. It could be another indictment in another jurisdiction for the leading candidate of the GOP right now into 2024.
I think you just gave me a great landing pad to just come on and say to you right now that this is significant. And what I think the most significant point about the Georgia one, setting aside DC with Jack Smith or Florida with Jack Smith, this is the most similar to the DC one, but setting those aside, setting aside New York, I believe, based on reporting, I believe based on the people involved, that this is not going to just be Donald Trump. And I think the significance of this is it's going to be his orbit, an entire swath of people. We could be seeing sitting Congress people be indicted here. We could see big names being indicted here. We could see, this is Georgia. And what's interesting is a lot of these events, Andrew, happened before the Senate race that we had. And a lot of the pressure was about those Senate races and the Republicans in there. And I think the most important takeaway from the entire thing I can tell you is you're hearing true statesmen, Jeff Duncan, Brad Raffensperger. These are Republicans. These are people that said the rule of law is what matters. And you could be on whatever side you want, but the historic nature of this says to me that at the end of the day, people choose country over party, and we need more of that in our country, whether they're Democrats being corrupt or Republicans being corrupt. The end of the day is country needs to come before party, and I think that this grand jury is a testament to people making those choices, Andrew.
Yeah, and Andrew, Trump has continued to deny any wrongdoing in the case. The DA also has been looking into false claims of election fraud and a data breach involving election equipment in Coffee County, Georgia, as well. So like I said, this has been more than 2 years in the making. And so Fani Willis, we'll see, and she's kind of going to be the prosecutor, the DA, that we're going to be talking about a lot, I think, over the course of the next few weeks. And then more legal headaches and troubles and dates to Trump's legal calendar will be added if he is included in whatever indictment comes down either tonight or tomorrow or in the next couple of days. Andrew Lieb, as always, we really appreciate you breaking all of that down for us. We do have the time here to really dive into it, and we'll talk again.
Thank you so much for dedicating this time to this important topic, Andrew.
Thank you. All right.